Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Welcome to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello. How's it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. I am back to bring you some more information, and today I want to talk about something I think we all have gone through a little bit, which is dealing with our own self-criticism. It is something that can really eat away at our successes if we let it. And self-criticism, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think a lot of highly self-critical individuals can be really successful and driven and motivated and quite brilliant. But there's also those, the road to those achievements and those successes can be quite bumpy. Self-criticism leaves us with a lot of stress and self-doubt and uncertainty and just a lot of, it makes you unhappy, right? Because you're always being so hard on yourself. And it is such a normal thing to be hard on yourself. I am one of the hardest persons on myself. And especially if you're a perfectionist or somebody that, is quite particular with your work, self-criticism can be really a huge part of your life. But today I want to talk about, signs that you are too self-critical. So maybe you might recognize these signs and might switch a little light bulb in your head, and you might be able to, trade in that self-criticism for some more kindness to yourself. And then, of course, I'll jump into ways of how we can overcome being so self-critical. But like I said, it is so normal to criticize yourself, to want to be the best version of you. I talk a lot about that on this podcast, is becoming the best version of you and, achieving your goals, getting to where you want to go and doing all of that. It's a huge thing to be going after some of your big dreams and your goals and things that you want out of life. And so it's quite inevitable to be, you're going to be hard on yourself at some point. You're going to tell yourself, I'm not doing this properly. I'm not doing this well enough. There's so many thoughts that can go through our heads when we're trying to work at becoming the best version of ourselves or creating the life that we want to live. And we are our own worst critics. And that is so true. And I think that's often why we might go to other people for advice and stuff, because we are so hard on ourselves naturally. But being so self-critical is just gonna pave your road to your goals and your dreams with a lot of different potholes of stress and anxiety, insecurity, self-doubt, and we all know that those things bring us down and they don't let us achieve our goals and our things to our greatest ability. So we really have to make sure that we are paying attention to the way that we are talking to ourselves, the way that we say things, and just the way that we are handling our own situations. So being self-critical, it can be quite straightforward as calling yourself an idiot or a loser or something when you aren't meeting your standards or you don't think you're doing something to your best of your ability or to what you think it should be. And this is really just kind of putting a downer on something that you could be happy with, your accomplishments and things that you are succeeding. And even if you're not quite there, but like I say, every single step and every single small victory is an important victory that we should always celebrate and be grateful for, our baby steps to becoming the best version of ourselves. But also being super self-critical can come in ways that we don't see it, that it's not as straightforward, I guess. You know, it can kind of sneak out in different ways of like an eating disorder, having social anxiety, being depressed, any kind of some sorts of mental illnesses, or just not really, you know, it leaks out into our personality in different forms, into different aspects of our lives. And so I just think it's so important because it can be part of many different aspects of our lives, and it is something that is really holding us back from achieving everything that we want to achieve. And sometimes I shouldn't say sometimes, a lot of the times we need to change our poor self-criticism into some kindness. And criticism is good. It can be really good to be critical of your own work and to want what's best for yourself. And you know, when someone else gives you constructive criticism, like, it can be quite beneficial, right? And so if you are able to give yourself constructive criticism, that is definitely beneficial. But it comes to the point where we are so self-critical, or we're getting so much criticism, that it really puts a damper and negative impact on the things that we are accomplishing and the things that we are trying to accomplish. So we have to make sure that we get control of the way that we are talking to ourselves and the way that we are handling situations, so that we can fully reach our goals and accomplish everything that we want to. And, you know, it's definitely not going to be an easy road to do that, but we want to try to avoid those stressful potholes and the insecurity and self-doubt as much as we can. So let's just jump right into talking about self-criticism and just some signs that you might be too self-critical. And so the number one sign I would have to say is that you're never really content. You always feel like you want more, like you're not fully satisfied with what you are doing. You just always want it to be better. You want it to be more. You want it to be bigger, better, but like, you know, you're just all for it, and which is good. Go get her and make the best version of you, or the best thing that you can. But if you're never content with yourself, how are you ever going to really celebrate those small victories that you should be celebrating? Because every single step that we take to becoming the best version of ourselves is a small victory that we need to celebrate, and we need to appreciate and really understand that is a huge thing. Every small step is a huge step, in my opinion. It is a huge step forward. It's a chance to continue to create the best version of yourself and to continue to learn more about yourself. And so if you're never content, you're never going to be giving yourself that pat on the back of, wow, I did really good. And we need to have those feelings of, I feel accomplished. I feel like I did a good thing. It should never be, I want more, I want more. It should be, look what I did. Yes, there's always room for improvement, and there's always things that we can do better and things that we can, you know, try to take to the next level. But if you are trying your best, you are putting your effort in, and you are succeeding, or you are, you know, creating something that is still wonderful. Maybe there is definitely room for improvement, but we should always, you know, give ourselves a pat on the back and celebrate those small victories. So if you're never feeling quite content with what you're doing, you are probably being too self-critical on yourself, and you need to really understand to celebrate all those small victories. Another sign is that you're always constantly feeling overwhelmed, probably because you are never content, and so you always feel like you have so many things to do. So self-critical people are often quite responsible and they're reliable, but this personality trait can kind of go both ways. And so if you are, you know, sometimes you are overloading your to-do list, you're overloading your schedule, you're feeling super overwhelmed because you have all these different responsibilities that you're giving yourself, and you're relying on yourself to do so many different things that you're not taking the time to enjoy the things that you are doing, or just to enjoy life itself. So you're constantly feeling overwhelmed, like you always have more to do. And this goes hand in hand with never feeling content. When you're not content, you're always going to feel like, oh, I need to do this. I need to get better at this. I have to practice more of this. And so we're never content, and so that we're always constantly overwhelmed. We are being too self-critical. We're not just letting ourselves check off our regular to-do list. We're always having a secondary or adding on to that to-do list of more things that we can do and more things we can do better at. Another thing that is always feeling guilty. People who are highly self-critical step out of line quite often if they are feeling like they screwed things up, and they feel quite bad about it for a long time. So if you hold on to guilt, like you messed up and it's super hard to let go of that, that can be really scary. It can definitely be something that is, when you're always feeling guilty about something, you're always carrying this burden, which I find is just a scary thing to be carrying on your shoulders of guilt, right? We don't want to be carrying guilt around with us. That is going to hold us back from being the best version of ourselves and creating things to the best of our ability. So you don't want to be carrying this guilt on your back because you made a tiny mistake. This definitely, perfectionists and people that are always trying to do everything perfect. If you mess one little thing up, you might be stressing about it for quite some time. Whereas others are, hey, life happens, I made a mistake, I'm just going to do better next time, or I'm going to create a better version next time, or, be the better version next time, whatever the case is. And so if you're constantly feeling guilty of something that you might have just made a little bit of mistake for, a little bit of a bump or a hiccup, then you're probably too self-critical. Another sign then is that you kind of are super independent to the point where maybe a little bit too independent. You're always standing on your own 2 feet and you rely or you don't let anyone else help you out. You can't ask for help, really what it comes down to. I just did a whole episode on being independent, and it's so crucial to find your independence so that you can become the best version of yourself, but you also have to find that healthy balance of you still need to be able to ask somebody for help or ask somebody for advice or, listen to other people's opinions and their beliefs and values and take that stuff into consideration. If you're only focusing on you and what you think is right and what you're going to do, then you're going to be missing out on so many different aspects of life and so many different, so much information and values and opinions that are so crucial and that could change your life for the better. And so if you're too scared to ask for help, you just think that you have to do it alone and that, it's, if you ask for help, maybe that's a sign of failure for you. That probably means that you are too self-critical. Okay, so those are just the first few signs. I do have some more that you might clue in and think, hey, maybe I am a little too self-critical, but it is time for a break, so don't go anywhere. When we get back, I will start sharing some more signs of that, and then we will jump into, of course, how to overcome being too self-critical. Stay tuned.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. We are back and we are talking about being too self-critical and why it could be holding you back from becoming the best version of you. Well, today, I think this is just an important subject as well. I forgot to mention this before. I just think that, with all of the high stresses that are going on in our world right now, it might be more apparent that your self-criticism is taking over because we are put into a time of uncertainty. We are put into a time of, we don't know. First of all, we never know what the future is going to hold. But right now, we really don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We don't know what our lives are going to look like or what is going to happen. There is so much chaotic, crazy things happening. And when we are put into a place of uncertainty, of just being scared, being in this place of the unknown, we can be more hard on ourselves. We can can be more self-critical than we usually would be because we're put into a stressful, uncertain time. And when we are put into a stressful scenario where there is so much uncertainty, it is so natural to be critical of yourself and to, really kind of be hard on yourself for the things that you are doing or maybe that you're not doing. Maybe it's not you're being hard on your own work, you're being hard on not working enough because, but your anxieties and stresses and all of the factors of what's going on in our world right now is putting a strain on you, is holding you down and not allowing you to work at your best ability. And so we can have these really scary thoughts of self-criticism, like we are not enough, that we are not doing enough, that we will never be enough. And that's really scary. And that's the main reason why I wanted to talk about this today is that no matter what life has been thrown at you and what scenario that you are in, it is definitely normal to be self-critical, but we cannot let that hold us down from still moving forward in our lives. And it is okay to not be doing as much as you normally would be right now. It is okay that your quality of work might not be to the extent that it was before. There is so much uncertainty. There is so much stress that is going on. And so we have to give ourselves a little bit of a break and to really not be so critical on ourselves right now, because this is times of, like, when does this happen in our lifetime, right? Like, it's just absolutely crazy. So we have to understand to give ourselves a break and to be kind to ourselves every single chance that we get. We have to switch that terrible criticism into kindness and pat ourselves on the back and celebrate those small victories, especially during this time of uncertainty and stress. Okay, sorry, I rambled on, but I do just want to say, so another sign of being too self-critical is always worrying about the what if scenarios. You kind of see the worst case scenario of what may happen and you start to obsess about that, because this is kind of where your self-doubt and your self-criticism really form, and they become this insecurity of what if this happens? What if I don't do this properly? What if I'm not getting my work done? What if I never get my job back? What if, there's always these what if scenarios. And so you're being too critical of what if or what could happen instead of just focusing on what you need to focus on in this moment. I have found that waking up and just focusing on what you need to do today, what you need to accomplish, your to-do list, and I highly suggest making your to-do list a little bit shorter than it usually is, and then checking off every single thing on that to-do list, you're going to have a sense of pride, of accomplishment, of confidence, of you're just going to feel good to be able to check off those things. And so we have to wake up, and instead of thinking of the what if scenarios, we have to think of what can I do today to feel good about myself, to feel proud, and to feel confident in the things that I am doing in my life and the person that I am. So make your to-do list, check those things off every day, and we have to stop worrying about those what if scenarios to our best of our ability. If we're constantly worrying about what if, we are probably being too critical on ourselves and not trusting ourselves that we can handle any situation that is thrown at us. If you are too self-critical as well, you might just have really impossibly high standards, which is probably why you were never content and you're always feeling overwhelmed. And then this is also probably why you were too scared to ask for help. When you have impossibly high standards, you are never going to be happy. You are never going to feel like you've accomplished it. You are never going to feel like you have succeeded your dreams or your goal, because those standards are just unrealistic. And it's definitely great to have high standards. I think there is nothing wrong with that, but we have to make sure that they are realistic, that they are achievable. And I say go big or go home, and I 100% agree, go big or go home, but you have to make sure that you are setting yourself up to something that is achievable. If we have such high standards, you will never stop being too self-critical, because you will never reach those standards. We really have to make sure that we are able to accomplish the things that we are setting out to accomplish. And it might take time. It's going to take a lot of effort. I'm not saying that you need to make your goals easy and super achievable. I think, definitely go big or go home. Make your dreams big, but put the effort in to do those things. You just have to make sure you find the right boundary, the right line of are my standards too high? Or, is this obtainable? Am I just going to have to work my butt off to obtain it? Yes. Okay, that's great, but you have to make sure that you just have to work your butt off, but you will obtain it one day. You will get there, and believing in yourself that you will get there is definitely a good step to making sure that your standards aren't too high, that you can just achieve what you set your mind to. But you have to find that right boundary line for yourself to, what is too much or what is too little. It's different for everybody, right? Another sign of being too critical is that you can't accept compliments. Have you ever tried to compliment someone and they're like, oh no, sorry, no, I look gross today. Like, ew, no, why'd you? And it's kind of awkward, right? It's kind of like, I just told you that I really liked the way that you look today, and you just put a huge negative spin on it. And it's very awkward and uncomfortable when you do that, right? Because it's like, well, I think you look pretty. And the person's like, no. And you're like, okay, well, I don't know how to handle this situation. But it can be hard to accept a compliment when you do have self-doubt, where your self-esteem is not to the point maybe where it should be. But this is self-criticism is definitely a part of not being able to accept compliments, because we have this thing in the back of our minds, like we aren't enough, like we don't deserve to have that compliment, that we aren't pretty enough, we aren't good enough, we aren't smart enough. And so we have these thoughts in our mind because we let ourselves have these thoughts in our mind, instead of receiving a compliment and just simply saying thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that positive energy, that positive thing that you just sent me, and actually accepting that positive compliment and that positive energy inside of you is going to make you automatically feel better. So you have to let yourself accept it. Maybe you're still working on your self-esteem and your self-confidence of really believing that compliment, but let yourself absorb that possibility or that positivity, because that will really help you feel better about yourself, and that will help you be less critical on yourself as well. Just let yourself say thank you. Smile and nod and say thank you, and I think that you will just automatically feel that positive energy when you let yourself really absorb it. So those are some signs that you might be too self-critical. I could go on a list of different things that might, trigger saying that you are too self-critical, and it's kind of different for everybody. But, I think the main thing is that you're never feeling content. You're always feeling overwhelmed. You can't ask for help. You can't accept positive things that come your way. You have too high of standards, so you're never going to feel content. Things like these are just signs of ways that we are holding ourselves back, not letting ourselves completely go to our full potential of who we really are. And I think it's so important to be able to tap into our full potential and go after all the things that we want and to achieve those things. And we are our worst critics, and being constructive and being hard on yourself for certain things is beneficial, because we want to keep working harder and pushing outside of our comfort zones. But we have to find that line of being too self-critical and just being, constructive. And if we are constructive, I think that's great. We always are learning and improving and doing new things, but we have to find that line, which is just so different for everybody. Okay, it's time for another break, but when we get back, I am now going to jump in just some ways that we can overcome that toxic self-criticism that we all deal with at some point in our life. So stay tuned. I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Happiness podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. All right, hello, we are back, and I am sharing information with you about being too self-critical and how we can beat that inner self-criticism that is holding us back from being the best version of ourselves. So our inner dialogue is quite powerful. Our thoughts, the ways that we speak to ourselves, the ways that, we are communicating with ourselves can be, it can either be really powerful in a positive way, or it can be really powerful in a negative way. And it's all about the way that we are talking to ourselves and the ways that we let those thoughts and those things that we are saying to ourselves and the actions that we choose to do, how that impacts the ways that we are creating the life that we want to create. So with all of that being said, let's talk about, first of all, the thing that we need to stop doing is talking so negatively to ourselves. We have to pay attention to our thoughts to overcome our self-criticism. 9 times out of 10, it is not as much your actions that are being too self-critical. It is your thoughts inside of your head that I am not good enough. This is not good enough. I will never be good enough. The thing is that you are good enough, but you are only as good as you can make yourself to be. If you are holding yourself back with self-doubt and criticism and negativity, then that is what you're going to be. We have to control our thoughts. We have to pay attention to them and the ways that we are speaking to ourselves. Are you speaking to yourself the way that you would talk to your mom or your best friend or somebody that is having a really hard day and you want to cheer them up? Do you talk to yourself like that, or do you talk to yourself in a negative way that is actually tearing down on your self-esteem and your confidence in the person that you are? We're always hearing our own narration in our head, and it's very easy to become oblivious to the messages and the things that we are saying to ourselves. And so we have to pay close attention to what we are saying to ourselves, because it makes a larger impact than you think. You're like, it's just in my head. Does it really matter? Yes, it matters. It does matter. And so the way that you talk to yourself is so crucial. And so I think a tip to help you with this is just becoming more aware of yourself, doing that self-reflection I talk about so often. Another way that we can do this is posting positive messages around our house. I've mentioned this with sticky notes or little things right on your mirror, whatever you want to do, just some positive affirmations, some positive words that you can, if you see them visually, you might actually start to say them to yourself more. And wake up, start your morning routine with waking up, looking in the mirror, and telling yourself 3 positive things about yourself. It sounds silly. It sounds like it's ridiculous. It sounds like it's not going to do much. It does. Wake up, look in the mirror, and tell yourself that you are enough, that you are smart enough, that you are creative enough, that you are enough to achieve every single thing that you want to achieve. So wake up, start your morning routine by saying 3 positive things to yourself. Post sticky notes with positive words and affirmations around your house, and pay attention to the way that you are talking to yourself. Would you say the things that you say to yourself to your best friend or your mother? If the answer is no, you should not be saying them to yourself. So pay attention to your own inner dialogue. Another thing is just to really examine the evidence, okay? So your thoughts aren't always true. We like to make things up in our heads, and they're often over-exaggerated and negative, and it's really important to examine the evidence before you start to believe your thoughts. If you were telling yourself that you were going to stand up in front of this crowd and embarrass yourself, and it is going to be terrible, and you're going to bomb your presentation, and you are going to completely just destroy yourself in front of this huge audience, and you're freaking out, and you're, okay, stop, breathe, take a piece of paper out, write down the evidence that indicates you are going to fail. Then list all the evidence that you aren't going to fail. Your pros and your cons. Okay, think about it. All of the evidence that you are going to fail, the thoughts inside of my head. Okay, now the evidence that you aren't going to fail, I worked hours on this presentation. I spent so much time practicing and presenting this in front of my family and friends to be prepared. I have studied and researched, and I know this knowledge the inside and out. I have stood in front of a crowd before, and I have accomplished it. Things like that. So list both sides of your evidence, examine them, and just writing these things down alone will actually show you that you are capable of doing what you want to do and setting your mind to it. So examine the evidence. Of course, just replacing those exaggerated negative thoughts in our head with realistic statements. So this helps with writing those things down around your house, and just replace your negative thoughts. Change your wording, right? So, instead of thinking, I'll never get a promotion, change your thoughts to, if I'm working hard enough, I will get my promotion, and I keep investing in myself, I will get to where I want to be. It's just changing the structures of your sentences in your head that can do a huge wonder to the self-criticism that you're experiencing. Always ask yourself what advice that you would give to a friend. Like I said, how would you talk to your best friend or your mother? What kind of advice would you give somebody else? So really, we should be talking to ourselves like we would talk to our best friend or our mother or our grandmother, with respect and love and all of that good stuff. And so making sure that you just ask yourself, if my best friend was having this problem, what advice would I give to her? Would I be hard on her? Would I tell her that she's not enough, that I'm not content with it, that you should be doing more? No, you wouldn't. You would actually be kind and nice, and you would, look at the positive things of what that person has done. So look at the positive things that you have done, and always write these things down. Give yourself those visuals. It's also just getting these thoughts outside of your head. So that's another thing too. Always write down things. If you feel like your head is very overwhelmed and cluttered with all these kind of negative emotions and criticisms, write it down. Even if you have to write a quite negative letter to yourself. I know that sounds kind of negative, but a negative letter sounds negative, of course, but if you write that negative letter to yourself, sometimes you just need to release those emotions. And then I highly suggest, after you write that negative letter, write a list of gratitudes and affirmations and positive things to yourself as well. So you get you kind of release all of those bad thoughts, those negativity, and then you start to absorb that positivity and the good things that you need to hear. Always balance self-improvement with self-acceptance. Like I said, always, celebrate your small victories. There is a difference between telling yourself that you're not good enough and reminding yourself that there is room for improvement. So accept who you are, accept your flaws, accept those imperfections, and, be able to turn those into new ways of self-improvement and ways that you can better yourself in so many different aspects. So, you have to accept every single thing that you are as a person, and you have to understand that there is always room for improvement, and there's lots of room for self-improvement and learning about yourself, and you might not know yourself to your best ability right now, and so you have to give yourself a break and understand that there is more time, there is more lessons to be learned, there is more experiences to go through for you'll fully understand and be who you are. But you have to accept yourself for every single part of the way. And so this, I think, just learning how to really be aware of yourself, writing things down, journaling, self-reflection, understanding that acceptance, and letting yourself accept those flaws is a huge step forward in getting rid of those negative criticisms that are going on in your head. We basically have to try to train our brain to think differently when we are in a funk. So start thinking of positive thoughts, changing your structures of your sentences, and writing things down. Recognize also how your self-criticism impacts your mood and your behavior by just taking track of any self-critical thoughts that you have. So by writing these down, you can write them down on your phone or on a piece of paper, and just note each self-critical thought as, there I go again. There's something that's not, make your list. And so I think making a list and writing it down in front of you is a super beneficial way to become more aware of how critical your thoughts are. Do yourself a challenge. One day, write down all these thoughts that you have in your head about yourself. If you're sitting there doing your work at your desk and you have a negative thought, write it down. You have a positive thought, write it down. You're cooking dinner and you burn the dinner and you say, oh, I am such a loser. I am such a failure. How did I burn this dinner? It's so easy. It's mac and cheese. How is that even possible? Write it down. And then at the end of the day, look at those things that you said to yourself and really take a grasp of how are these impacting your moods? How did you feel at those times too, right? Try to write down, okay, I said this to myself while I was cooking dinner and I burnt it. And how did that make me feel? Probably pretty negative, probably pretty crappy about yourself. So writing these things down and just really understanding how it is impacting your mood and your behavior. Maybe you burnt dinner, you said something negative to yourself, now you're grumpy, and then you take it out on your spouse, your wife or your husband or a family member, and you're grumpy and you yell at them for no reason. See how your self-critical thought from you burning your dinner has just escalated to, putting yourself in a bad mood and then letting that bad mood affect others in your life. It's like a cycle. It goes all the way through. So becoming more aware of those critical thoughts. Always be setting your achievable goals, that you have. We all have different opportunities and things for each day, but we have to, like I said, find that fine line of making sure we're not setting ourselves up for something that is just unachievable, but making sure that we are still pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone so that we are going after things that are going to continue to grow us and make us the best version of ourselves. And then lastly, I would just have to say that being honest and real and authentic with yourself and sticking to your own word and being honest with how critical you truly are with yourself is probably the biggest step in becoming, overcoming your self-criticism. It's just being honest. Okay, did my work on this project suck today? Yeah, it did. It did kind of suck. Was I really hard on myself about it? Yeah, I kind of was really hard on myself about it. Did I have negative thoughts about it? Yeah, okay, I'm going to jot those down. And now you're honest, you're real. Okay, now be honest and real with yourself of how you can change those thoughts. You can change the things that you did around. The more honest you are with yourself, the less scared you're going to be of failure, the more acceptance of yourself you will have. You will understand yourself better. You will learn more about yourself, and you will achieve everything that you want to set your mind to, everything that you want out of life. You can get. You just have to push away the barriers that are holding you back from doing that. So making sure that you are not too hard on yourself, understanding that life happens as well, especially right now. We are in times of uncertainty, and these are times where you might be extra hard on yourself, but it is more crucial to be more kind to yourself now than ever. These are uncertain, stressful times, and this is when we need to show the most kindness to the world and to ourselves. So I hope you continue to try to switch your critical thoughts into some kindness and some positive words, and just continue to spread kindness every chance you get, and especially to yourself. Well, that is all the information I have to share with you today. Thank you for listening to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I had an amazing time sharing this information with you. Please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, to like and follow us on social media, and leave a 5-star review. I look forward to sharing more information with you next time. Please remember to pat yourself on the back, celebrate your small victories, and spread kindness every single chance you get. Thank you so much. Till next time. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.